The impact should have shattered my ribs. That was the first thought that drifted lazily through my mind as I lay flat on my back, staring at the vaulted ceiling of the Carthage combat hall. The alloy plates above shimmered with embedded starlight, artificial constellations meant to inspire fear and awe in new cadets. Right now, all they did was blur. The crowd had gone quiet. That was the second thing I noticed. Silence in the combat hall was rare. 30 species trained here, warrior cultures, mercenary legions, imperial heirs. Noise was the natural state of the place. Shouts, bets being called in alien tongues, armor grinding, energy fields humming. But when my body hit the floor, the sound died like someone had cut the oxygen. I turned my head slightly. My cheek pressed against the cold metal. Diagnostics scrolled across my retinal implant. Structural damage, minimal. Cardiac stress, elevated. Pain response, suppressed. Manual override. Interesting. I blinked once and exhaled slowly. Above me, she stood frozen. Valeria of House Thorne. The strongest first-year combatant in the Academy's history. The one they whispered about in corridors. The one instructors used as a warning instead of an example. The one who had already killed 3 opponents in sanctioned duels. Accidentally, officially. Her 4-fingered hand was still extended from the strike. The kinetic gauntlet around her wrist glowed faintly, energy dispersing. Her crest of obsidian-scaled hair flared slightly, a Threnian instinctive response to aggression. She had hit me with enough force to crater reinforced plating. And yet, I was breathing just fine. Her eyes, slitted, gold-ringed, predator-bright, locked onto mine. Confusion rippled across her face. Then something else. Fear. I smiled. 3 hours earlier, I'd been cleaning nutrient residue from a cafeteria tray, wondering, once again, why I had volunteered for this. The Interstellar Combat Academy did not accept humans lightly. We were soft, they said. Fragile. Designed for endurance rather than impact. Clever, maybe, but physically irrelevant on a galactic battlefield. I agreed with most of that, which was exactly why I was here. I wasn't a soldier. Not really. I had never worn armor before arriving on Carthage Prime. My background was classified research, adaptive physiology, long-term survivability studies under extreme conditions. In simpler terms, I specialized in getting hit and not dying. When the Academy announced a cross-species integration experiment, Earth's directorate jumped at the chance to place one observer cadet into the program. Not to compete, to measure. That cadet was me. Elias Rowe. Human. Unranked. Unimpressive. At least, that was the cover. Rowe. I looked up from my tray. Instructor Havoc loomed over me, his 6 eyes blinking asynchronously. His mandibles clicked in irritation. You're scheduled for live evaluation, he said. Combat hall. Immediately. My stomach tightened. Against who? Havoc's upper eyes narrowed. Valeria. The cafeteria went silent. Someone dropped a utensil. It clattered far too loudly. I nodded once. Understood. Inside, my heart began to race. Not fear. Anticipation. The combat hall smelled like ozone and blood. I stepped onto the central platform wearing standard-issue practice gear. Light plating, no shields, no enhancements beyond my implants. Across from me, Valeria rolled her shoulders, muscles shifting beneath dark, scaled skin. She wore a full kinetic rig, her status granting her exemptions from most safety limits. The crowd leaned forward. This wasn't a match. It was a demonstration. Havoc's voice boomed. Engagement will continue until one combatant is incapacitated. Valeria tilted her head, studying me like prey that had wandered too far from its herd. You're small, she said, her voice resonant and calm. Yield now. I shook my head. Can't. Her crest flared. So be it. The signal chimed. She moved faster than my eyes could track. The first blow slammed into my chest and launched me backward. The second came before I landed, a sweeping strike that took my legs out from under me. Then the third. That was the one that knocked me flat, which brought us back to the silence. I planted my palm against the floor and pushed myself upright. Slowly, deliberately. The crowd erupted. Valeria staggered back a half step. No, she whispered. That's impossible. I stood fully and rolled my neck, joints clicking. Good hit, I said. You almost cracked the limiter. Her eyes widened. Limiter? I smiled wider. Then she attacked again. The middle of the fight blurred into sensation. Impact after impact. Bone-jarring strikes. Energy discharges that would have liquefied a normal human's organs. Each hit fed data into my implants, which adjusted microsecond by microsecond, redistributing force, reinforcing tissue, altering neural thresholds. This wasn't strength versus strength. It was adaptation versus tradition. Valeria fought like a storm, overwhelming, relentless, lethal. But every time she hit me, her advantage shrank. I learned her timing, her patterns, the subtle hitch in her left shoulder before a power strike, the fraction of a second delay when she redirected momentum. And more importantly, she learned something too. I wasn't breaking. Her breathing grew heavier. Her strikes grew wilder. Why won't you fall? She roared. I caught her wrist mid-swing. The hall gasped. Our eyes locked. Because, I said quietly, I was built for this. I released her and stepped back. She stared at me, not as prey, as a problem. The final exchange came quickly. She charged, pouring everything into one decisive blow. I braced. The impact sent shockwaves through the platform. When the dust settled, we were still standing. But her knees trembled. Mine didn't. Havoc raised all 6 arms. Match ended. No one cheered. They just stared. Valeria found me later in the medical bay. I was sitting upright, shirt discarded, nanofibers knitting bruises closed across my torso. She stopped at the doorway. You should be dead, she said. Statistically, I replied, yes. She crossed her arms. What are you? I met her gaze. Human. She studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she bowed her head. A warrior's acknowledgement. I have never been forced to stop, she said. Not once. Get used to it, I said gently. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Instructors adjusted curricula. Sparring protocols were rewritten. Suddenly, humans weren't fragile. We were unknown variables. Valeria began training with me, not against me. She pushed my limits. I pushed hers. Where she relied on overwhelming force, I relied on resilience. Where I adapted, she refined. Something unexpected grew between us. Respect. Then trust. Then something quieter, deeper. One evening, after a brutal session, she sat beside me on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. On my world, she said, strength decides worth. And now? I asked. She glanced at me. Now I wonder what survives longer, strength or the will to stand back up. I smiled. The Academy's experiment concluded at the end of the cycle. Reports were filed. Data transmitted back to Earth and beyond. The conclusion was simple. Humans were not the strongest, but we were the hardest to put down. As for Valeria, she never knocked me down again. And even if she had, I would have stood up smiling. The Academy never officially admitted that the balance of power had shifted. Institutions like the Interstellar Combat Academy survived on image, on the belief that its hierarchy was immutable, that strength followed predictable lines drawn by evolution and bloodline. Publicly, my match with Valeryx was classified as an anomaly. Privately, it became required viewing for every senior instructor, because anomalies, when repeated, stopped being accidents. They became warnings. 3 weeks after our duel, the combat hall filled again, not for a spectacle, but for a declaration. Representatives from 7 systems watched from elevated platforms. Holocams hovered, recording every angle. This time, I stood beside Valeryx rather than across from her. That alone unsettled them. Instructor Havek addressed the assembly, his voice echoing off the alloy walls. Cadet Elias Rowe has completed the integration trial. Results confirm adaptive survivability beyond projected limits. Effective immediately, humans will be reclassified within combat parameters. A pause. Not as support species. Murmurs spread, but as endurance combatants. I felt Valeryx's claws brush my hand, brief, grounding. A Threnian gesture of acknowledgement, of alliance. Later, as the crowd dispersed, she turned to me. "On my world," she said quietly, "this would make you a rival to kings." "I don't want a throne," I replied. She studied my face, searching for deception. Finding none. "What do you want?" I thought about that. "I want to make sure no one like me ever has to prove their worth by surviving alone." That answer stayed with her. The first real test came sooner than expected. A border skirmish erupted near the Perseus fracture. Pirate coalition, multiple species, unpredictable tactics. The Academy was ordered to deploy a mixed unit response. For the first time, a human cadet was included in the strike roster. Me. Valeryx requested reassignment to my unit. No one denied her. The battlefield was chaos, void combat bleeding into close quarters boarding actions. Explosions tore through hulls. Gravity failed and returned in violent pulses. Where Valeryx carved through enemies like a living weapon, I moved through the aftermath, pulling survivors from wreckage, holding choke points, absorbing hits meant for others. I took a plasma round through the shoulder that would have killed most species outright. I kept fighting. By the end of the operation, the pirate flagship drifted powerless. Its crew surrendered. Our unit returned intact. That mattered more than any kill count. The debriefing chamber was quiet when it ended. Valeryx remained standing after the others left. She removed her helmet slowly, the rigid composure she wore in battle finally slipping. "You could have died," she said. "So could you," I replied. She shook her head. "No, not like you would have. You stepped into fire without knowing if you would stand again." I met her gaze. I knew. "How?" I smiled faintly. "Because standing up is what we do." She laughed then, soft, incredulous. The sound of someone realizing the universe was larger than they'd been taught. That night, on the observation deck where stars stretched endless and cold, she stood beside me again. "In Threnian tradition," she said carefully, "there is a bond formed between warriors who save one another's lives repeatedly. It is permanent." I turned to her. "What kind of bond?" Her crest lowered, vulnerable. "One that does not break when one falls." I reached for her hand. "I think," I said, "humans would call that family." She didn't pull away. Years later, cadets would whisper new stories in the academy halls. They spoke of the human who could not be broken, of the Threnian champion who chose partnership over dominance, of training doctrines rewritten, of alliances reforged, of wars ended not by overwhelming force, but by refusal to stay down. And sometimes, during sparring sessions, Instructors would point to the scarred platform at the center of the combat hall and say, "That is where a human was knocked down." Then, after a pause, "And where the galaxy realized he was still smiling."